Thanks everyone for coming. To start with, does anyone know who this man is, apart from a devilishly good-looking person taken in the 60s?
We have prizes. Anyone have a guess?
It'll be someone that when I say the name, you've probably heard of him. It's a gentleman by the name of Melvin Conway. So you may have heard of Conways Law, and it's the principle that organisations will design their systems and their technologies in alignment with their organisational and communication structure. And this is something that has very much remained true right through till now. So if we go a little bit of a timeline view of what we've seen since, let's take 2000 as a bit of a reference point. We've seen a raft of different methods and approaches, and we've also seen a proliferation of different technology approaches to try to deliver value to people. So we started our life with waterfall. So that was where I started my world. It was something where everything was rather large. It was geared around the electronics industry, that when you were going to press the button to produce a computer chip, it was going to work. And we tried to apply that same paradigm to how we built software and how we built systems. We then thought there was potentially a better model when we moved to Scrum. And for those of you who have worked in agile teams, you've realised that sometimes that doesn't quite fit with how your organisation works. And it's not necessarily that silver bullet that will just change how you deliver and how you deliver value. We then start to see different proliferations of models. So some of you may have come across the Scaled Agile framework, which is to try and take the principles of cross-functional teams and bring that to an enterprise organisation. So how do I actually pull things together to make it work in the context of my organisation? And there's going to be a raft of different methods and approaches that will continue for the next 25 years. For the rest of our careers, there's not going to be a shortage of new ways to do things. But on the flip side, we started to see different technology approaches. So early 2000 was very much around packaged software. It was how do I configure this software that's provided by big vendors to deliver an outcome. We then moved into what was the mythical world of digital. So I don't know if everyone remembered the first time they did internet banking on their mobile application. It was a fundamentally new experience that you could not do before. We started to hear things like continuous delivery. So how do I actually build software that I can release quickly rather than going back to a waterfall model where it was done once every 6 to 12 months? Things like Amazon Web Services became a relevant and viable way to build software in a cost-effective and timely fashion. And then we started to get to the age of data. So if you've been to many of these conferences for the last 5 to 10 years, big data was the term that everyone talked about. So big data was going to change the world. We started with our data warehouses, we moved towards data lake, and then we want to get to what is machine learning and the mythical AI that will really change some of the world for us. But it's no surprise that you look at those silo nature of those different technologies. So we still have core IT organisations. We'll still have organisations that have been established as digital. We still set up centre of excellence or organisational units that are focused on data. The challenge with this is we're not focusing on an actual customer. We're focusing more on our internal structures and the handoffs between them. And the reality is, a customer doesn't actually really care how you've organised your business. They're external to you. They actually care about the experience that you're creating for them. So James will touch a little bit now on our approach to start to break down some of these silos.
So if you just go back a slide for me, Pat. So Conway's Law was interesting because it kind of said that you end up designing technology systems that look very similar to your organizational structures. And it wouldn't surprise you that in many organizations today, these are actually 3 separate teams, all focused on delivering their own thing. And that really doesn't think about who the end customer is who's going to consume those things. So the framework that we use with our clients is to shift to the next slide, please. And at the end of the day, it's all about the actual real user in the middle. And the framework that we apply to think about technology is less about APIs and data and machine learning, but more about 3 core tenets of our strategy: experience, automation, and insights. And every technology project that we do with our clients focuses on those 3 things. So experience is, how can we actually bring together all of these different parts of our organization to deliver a real differentiating experience and something that's enlightening for a consumer or a customer, an internal customer or an external customer that they haven't seen before. Automation is, how can we remove friction from our processes? So if we have poor processes, we don't want to present those poor processes to our customers. And how can we try and lower the cost to serve and the cost to transact? And then insights. We've got lots of data flowing around in our organization. We'll give you some examples of this shortly, but how can we generate new insights from that data that helps us drive better experiences and more automation? So that's what we want to achieve. That's the what. And the next question for us is the how. And our approach is really anchored around four core principles. And I'll just touch on the approach to these principles, the method that we follow, and how we measure success. So principle number one for us is focusing on the real customer. And you may have heard this bit of talk these days around customer journeys, but this is really focused on who is our end customer of this service and what is the experience that they're going to have with these services. And really being able to map every single touch point that they have with your organization. Once you actually know what that journey looks like, that method is actually called human-centered design. So we're actually flipping it around. Rather than looking inward and facing outward, we're starting outward and building an experience around the customer and what they actually want to do. So that method is known as human-centered design, which is a capability we've built extensively within the Mantel Group. And how do we actually measure success for this? What we found works really well is for everyone in that organization or in that particular part of the organization to be incentivized with metrics around improving that customer experience. So once you've actually mapped out what that customer journey looks like, having metrics that apply to every single person in the organization, so everyone on the same scorecard, and how do we make that journey as better and better and better. The second principle is building empathy and trust into teams. I think one of the banes of existence in tech these days is the capital funding approach to projects, which tends to assume that a project starts, you spin up a team, it stops and the people leave. And what we've seen over time is that it takes a long time for people in project teams to build subject matter expertise and domain knowledge. And if you can actually keep a team together for longer, they'll be more successful, they'll be more engaged. So really trying to challenge the funding model to say, well, we have to work within the funding model, but long-running teams who are working together for a longer period of time can be far more successful than just a project team that comes and goes. So this method is called build it, run it. So teams that actually are accountable for the stuff that they build once it's built and running in production, they're accountable for making sure that it runs well. And that changes the mindset a lot, because if you're throwing something over the fence to someone else and your job is finished, the care factor is a lot lower. If you're building something that you're going to be accountable for, and if it breaks in the middle of the night, you're on the hook for it, the care factor suddenly changes quite a lot. And the way that we measure this is making sure that everyone in our teams or project teams with our clients are measured based on customer outcomes, not on internal measures. Thirdly, treating technology as a product. So a lot of the times we're building technology for internal use cases, for internal customer groups. And what we typically try and do is apply the same product management metrics and approach to internal products as if they were external products. So rather than mandating people to use things, we actually want people to use things. We want them to choose to use them rather than being mandated to use them. So applying basic platform thinking, as we call it, and treating our internal systems as if their customers are external customers. Getting feedback, getting customer satisfaction, building product backlogs, getting stakeholders to be part of the backlog prioritization process, and really treating things, even if they're internal, like first-class citizens. And then finally, redefining the operating model. So we've talked a lot about cross-functional teams and how valuable it is to get everyone working on a project around the same table and under one team. And we're seeing this get even more important now with the addition of data and machine learning. So I'm sure you're familiar with a product team where you've got maybe product managers, you've got developers, you've got testers, you've got operations people working together. We're now starting to see data science get plugged into that as well. So having a data scientist sitting in your product team who's constantly collecting new data on how it's being used, helping develop hypotheses and evaluate business hypotheses about how to make that product better. So we're seeing the definition of cross-functional expand to include data.
Excellent, thanks James. So we've kind of talked about the emphasis of focusing on a true customer, and then we've kind of stepped through how we can organise ourselves internally to set ourselves up for success. Now we'll talk about a few tangible experiences over the last 18 months that we've focused on where we've effectively leveraged this method. So the first one is actually a government use case around energy made easy. So effectively here, the experience we're trying to create for a user, for a true consumer, it's how can I actually do a comparison of the energy and gas plans that are available to me as an individual that's actually personalised to my usage patterns. On the flip side, for the energy regulator, it's obviously quite a diverse market. It's got a lot of focus at the moment. So providing the tools and services for them to be able to effectively manage both consumers and providers of energy. And then lastly, for energy providers, an opportunity to make the process for them to update their plans, pricing and energy information a lot more seamless and easier, which means that information will be more timely for those people that are going to consume it. So we use human-centered design principles where we did a large amount of customer research with real users of the systems, people that sit within the energy regulator, and also ombudsman as well. So this is a great way to get feedback from those who will use the system rather than hypothesising internally what we think that they would want. When we talk about automation, we talk about automation in two aspects here. One is actually automating a process that would have required manual entry from someone previously. So the example here is your energy bill. So sometimes energy bills can be quite complex to read. Some of the data people won't necessarily understand. So using computer vision, we effectively automated the capture of energy data from a bill that a consumer would take a photo, they would upload the photo, and that would capture all the information rather than manually. So that's again an experience that's become frictionless for a real user. When we also talk about automation, we talk about some of the infrastructure. So running complex and large software systems can be complex, and we need to extract that away from those that are using it and those that are running it. So we leverage a raft of different Amazon services that effectively take away a lot of the operational effort to run. It's something that Amazon's extracted away that complexity. So we use a lot of continuous integration and continuous delivery concepts to make sure that we've got a system that's highly available and requires a minimal amount of support once it's in a production environment. So that's really where we focus on automation. And then when we talk about insights and then bringing that back into a customer experience, by capturing all that information, so I've got a rich set of information from an energy consumer. We've also got a rich set of data that's available from energy providers and a raft of other historical information. We can provide personalised and targeted recommendations on the energy plans and prices that people should use. So again, bringing that all the way back up into that experience. If we didn't have that insight, what is the value in a great digital experience without that insight brought back in? So that's a really good example. We start to bring those together. Another one which is very close to my heart, if you talk to me for more than 2 minutes, you'll find out I do a lot of stuff with wine. So using IoT and agriculture. So those who know farming, it's very much a gut feel type industry. When should I water? When should I pick? What should I do? So what the user was looking to have here is real-time visibility for what's happening, in this case within their vineyard. They want to be able to see historical data so they can start to work out what they should be doing right now. But most importantly, how can they actually use data to predict what's next? So in farming, you can lose an entire crop. The yield and quality can impact your price by up to 90%. So this is an industry that's very tech light, but the use cases and the value, if we can actually leverage data to provide real information, is absolutely huge. So again, automation in this case was much more geared around how do we make technology simple and take the complexity away from farmers. So if you think about a product experience, this just needs to work. In this instance, Amazon's got an IoT platform, which we actually leverage quite heavily to build out the experience, so that someone is looking at a device, they've got a sensor out in a vineyard, but they don't have to worry about the nuts and bolts and everything else that exists within it. And so the insights, this is where it gets really exciting. So how can we help farmers to do things like understand when they should spray if they want to prevent disease? When should I water and how much? If I've only got 100,000 megalitres left, should I even water or should I give up for this year? And lastly, when should I pick? You know, quality is such an important indicator. So using all of these different measures and metrics can actually change an industry. And this is something that's become a lot more doable, especially in the last couple of years.
Oh yeah, perfect. So I'm going to hand this around. I want you to take a look at one of these and have a look at this while I'm talking. But this is some work, machine learning project that we did with AGL, so one of the largest energy generators and retailers in Australia. And this meter that I'm passing around is quite common around Australia. And I think it's fair to say that these devices predate UX as a discipline. They are not designed to be easy to read. And there are a lot of meters in Australia that aren't smart, so they still rely on somebody actually going to the property, looking at that meter and reading it. Now, when you see this thing come around, you'll see that it's got, 5 clock faces on the front. So to read it, you've got to read the dial on each clock. The first thing you might notice is that the clocks alternate between clockwise and counterclockwise. I have no idea why anyone would make it that complicated, but it is. The clocks also go up to 10 rather than 12, like a normal clock. Again, I don't know why you would do that. And you need to read the clocks from left to right. And if you read them from right to left, you'll actually get the reading wrong. So AGL have a feature in their mobile app where you can just snap a photo of the meter and it gets sent to AGL and someone will type in the reading. And they're trying to take a bit of the friction away from the customer of having to read that quite complex device. Unfortunately, people start sending in photos of the fridge, the dog, the cat, various other things around their house. So it kicks off this quite expensive back and forth with clients and emails to try and understand what the actual reading is. That's not the meter. You've taken a photo from 20 feet away. We can't see it. So they came to us and said, rather than having this manual process, could we use machine learning to actually automate reading that meter and read it accurately? So this project, luckily we had a whole raft of photos that customers had sent to AGL, so thousands and thousands of photos people were sending into a queue. So we used that as a training data set. And then using TensorFlow running on AWS, we're able to train a model that could accurately classify what type of meter it was. So understand that this is a clock face meter. And then based on understanding what type of meter it was, it could accurately extract a reading. We ran field trials of this in South Australia with about 250 AGL customers, and 85% of our readings were within $5 accurate of the bill. So we're able to get a very high degree of accuracy in a relatively short period of time, around a 12-week POC, and then through to field trials. So it really goes to show how advanced we've got and how the tooling around machine learning is now maturing. Another piece of work we've done with machine vision is with NIBE Insurance. So a very similar use case where with the NIB app, you can snap a photo of a medical receipt to automate a claim. And if you're the customer, it feels pretty automated to you because you snap a photo and then it, miraculously a few weeks later your claim's paid. Again, there's a big back office element to this. So a big operational overhead where people have to manually key in the claim for you. So using machine vision, again on AWS, we're able to actually extract the information from the claim and then feed that into the claims management system and put it in front of the operator. So the idea is not to remove operators or people from the process, it's to try and shorten the time and make their lives easier. So rather than having to sift through a photo, a bunch of the fields are pre-populated, and we can also give them a confidence score. So we can say, hey, we've got 95% confident we've read this field right. You don't have to look at this. But on a particular field, hey, our confidence is lower. You might want to go and have a look at this before you approve the claim. And what we've seen here is the engineering overhead now as machine learning moves from lots of POCs a year ago to lots of production-based systems. There's a really big overhead on production-grade engineering behind these systems and how you make these models things you can iterate and change and develop over time as you get new data. And our approach to this is to combine data science and engineering together so that we can build systems that are scalable, and when new data comes in, you can make these models more and more accurate each time around.
So 20 minutes isn't long, so really appreciate taking the time to have a listen. So we talked about putting the customer at the center, how we can set our structures up to make sure we're set up for success in terms of teaming and approaches. And I suppose as an organisation, we look at the breadth and the depth of experiences from design through to build on cloud platforms, how we integrate data into those experiences. So a few things we focus on, how can we educate? So discussions like this, if you want us to actually talk about these concepts, go into a little bit more depth with you, that's our happy place. It's fun talking to people around the challenges they have. There's opportunities where we'll actually enable. So it might be we don't need to come and solve the problem, we need to work with you to enable your team. And then lastly, there's situations where we come and deliver an outcome. So if it's something you're interested in, we're in the booth just over there. Feel free to pop by and have a chat during the day. We've also got some information details there as well. So thank you for coming at the 9 o'clock session as well, much appreciated. Cheers.
Thank you.